The Newcomer, page 200. Constance's voice was heard over the intercom announcing that she had refreshments. She was told to bring them in and did so. Chardonnay took over the pouring of the tea and Constance left. "I apologize for continuing the meeting while you have your breakfast, Queen Lucretia," Fedora said. Lucretia waved off the apology, her cheeks bulging with food. Fedora looked at Chardonnay. "Remind you of anyone we know?" Chardonnay blushed. "Anyway, since the program allows for the weaning of the males off the drug sets infesting them, and the practice annihilated, male charges won't mature the way that they do now. Eventually our males won't die during the last stages of puberty. They will live to ripe old ages. That beginning will not go unnoticed." Excuse me. "It took over a century for our society to become what it has. It will take time for it to adjust. After we enter the program, we will leave and block all panels, and the charges will return to the original rooms. No one will ever know we were here, except for the charges and the early risers." Chardonnay nearly choked on her tea over that statement. There were no early risers in Nision Castle, except for the serving matrices. "If no one will ever know what has happened, then why did you take the charges?" Lucretia asked. "Rehearsal, hopefully, and a bit of blackmail. We do not want force to be necessary," Fedora answered. Lucretia continued with her arguments for her people, while Fedora checked her analog. Knowing that this was the last time that she could escape without being detected, she resigned herself to her fate and listened. "What do I do while the plans take over? Stop the marriages? Stop the wagers? Stop the testings and the screenings? Or simply do nothing?" Fedora sighed. "No, Lucretia. Life will continue as it is for now. Women have taken women as mates in order to fill the void created by the imbalance of nature. They will gradually change as the males gradually change. Of course, some women will never want males for their companions. They won't have to, and they won't be judged by the circle for their decision, as there will be commoners who will feel the same way. Besides, we guaranteed that in our initial statement on the brief. How can I trust my enemy?" "That's a hard decision, I know, but you read the report. The original council was not like ours is today. They had no soul. They governed themselves. One woman, Lucretia. It was one demented and insane woman who took advantage of the world's crisis to gain supreme power for herself. The world was deceived back then as we are continued to be deceived today. There was a cure found for larconium. It was found by Victoria Lamberst, and it was introduced into the oceans, but that action was never reported to the world. Deborah Dixon, Deborah the Divine as you call her, was a revered doctor. She took Lamberst's findings and manufactured her own drug, one based on larconium, and made sure that it was part of the formula that was fed to the male infants as medicine. She was also a whiz on the computer." "This is more than hard to believe," Lucretia said, standing and arching circulation into her back. She went over to her wall windows and stayed there. Fedora rose and took her place next to her. "It isn't fair for you to make that decision alone. Keep me as your prisoner. That way, if the plan proves false, you can hang me before the masses." "That won't be necessary," Lucretia said, looking at the commons. "I know where you live." "Trust me, Lucretia. The program will replace the chemical being fed to our children and will erase the lethal formula. Even if a scientist were to check production, the stored information would be that of Newcomer. There will be no reason for her to suspect the ingredients. Remember, the computer has been running its own program unchallenged for over a century. If that's only as far as our plan goes, it's worth it. I trust, however, that this won't be the case. This slavery will end. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but this program will, at least, save our children." Lucretia looked strangely at Fedora. "Why do you insist that they are our male children? You are a commoner. You are barren and only given female children. That practice will be erased also. That way our daughters will be born with a womb and will be able to keep them no matter what test they do or do not pass. An ambitious plan." "Yes, it is," Fedora agreed. "Nature and God will prevail. Do you forget that almost 2 centuries ago women were deemed to be inferior to men? So easily you have all forgotten that. Of all things I have heard or read this past hour, women being inferior to men is the least notion that is the hardest notion to believe. Lucretia said, returning to the table. Hard to believe, but true, Fedora said, following her. She looked at her watch again. It's time for your decision. Why so quickly? There simply is no more time. The decision must be made now. All goes according to the prophecies. Some aspects to this plan weren't mine to make, she said quietly, trying not to be afraid what was to come next. Lucretia studied her enemy, wondering what she meant by her solemn statement. Go enact the program, but first, give me the code for stopping it. Fedora didn't wait for Lucretia to finish her sentence before seating herself before the computer. That will be found on your personal file, she said, typing into the computer. Another reason why we needed your assistance. You'll know it when you see it. Lucretia called to her from across the room. I'm not just allowing this in order to save my own life. I know, Fedora said, then asked her for her code. When her pinboard stopped entering the last program, she pushed her chair away from the desk. The chamber door burst open. Coco entered, her sotar pointing at Fedora. It sliced through her, and then Coco turned her sotar on Chardonnay. There was no reviving Fedora. She died as instantly as a century gone since had. Where did you get that sotar? Chardonnay asked. I always keep a backup, Coco answered. Then more guards will be coming soon, Chardonnay reasoned. We must get the males back to the rooms, and then unblock Xena.